We will now proceed to our keynote remarks. For the keynote remarks, I am honored to introduce the distinguished speaker, Mr. Kenji Yamada, State Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan. State Minister Yamada, please.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Sonobe, Dean of the Asian Development Bank Institute, the task force co-chairs, and those who are involved in Think7, Think7 Japan process, distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to have an opportunity to deliver the opening keynote speech at this T7 Japan Summit, a gathering of distinguished intellectuals from the G7 and other countries around the world. I look forward to lively discussion and policy recommendations on global issues among think tankers and researchers over the next 2 days. As we begin this T7 Japan Summit, I would like to introduce our view on the current global situation, discussions being held at the G7, and my expectation for the T7. First, allow me to speak about the state of the international order in 2023. The world is now at a turning point in history. This has two implications. First, the post-Cold War era, an era that began with the declaration of the end of the Cold War in 1989, has come to an end. Second, it is still not yet clear what the next era will look like. The end of the post-Cold War era became apparent to all with Russia's aggression against Ukraine. This act by a permanent member of the UN Security Council in violation of the fundamental principle of the international law, such as respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the general prohibition of the use of force. It is a blatant challenge to the international order that humanity has built up through the long-standing efforts. This challenge to the international order based on the rule of the law by force is not limited to Europe. In Japan's vicinity, unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force in the East China Sea and the South China Sea have been continuing in recent years. 2 weeks ago, North Korea's launch of a ballistic missile triggered an emergency J alert, which caused an uneasy morning throughout Japan. If the international community does not respond to those challenges in a united manner, I'm afraid we will lose the foundation of peace and prosperity in coming era. As we stand at this turning point in history, along with these challenges to the international order, we also face issues that threaten the very existing humankind. Disasters induced by climate change, dangers posed by infectious disease crises such as the COVID-19 pandemics, food and energy security, and the development challenge affected by all of these. The state of global governance to deal with these serious transnational challenges is still at a transitory stage. The development of emerging and developing countries and their increasing influence in the international communities are natural consequences of the post-Cold War era. And As various nations increase their influence in the world, we must humbly accept the fact that it is becoming increasingly difficult for the international community to converge under a single set of values and ideologies. On the other hand, at a time when international cooperation is needed more than ever, we must transcend conflicting values and intercept and find solutions to common challenges through dialogues and cooperation. This is our shared responsibility to the next generation, regardless of the country we live in. Against this backdrop, Japan is leading the G7 discussions towards the next month's G7 Hiroshima summit based on the following two perspectives. First, we will firmly reject any unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force or the threat to use nuclear weapons, as Russia has been doing, and will strongly demonstrate the world the strong will of the G7 to uphold international order based on the rule of law. Second, it is also important to strengthen our outreach to emerging and developing countries in the so-called Global South. Russia's recent aggression against Ukraine has imposed large adverse impact on people's lives around the world, including those in developing countries. The G7 will strongly respond to the challenge also faced by the Global South countries, such as those involving the global economy, including emerging energy and food security, as well as global issues, including climate, health, and development. We intend to strengthen our outreach to emerging and developing countries by calling for the G7's active contribution and cooperation on these issues. In this regard, it is also important to work closely with the G20, both in the run-up to the G7 summit and thereafter. We intend to work closely with India, which holds the G20 presidency this year. Prior to Hiroshima summit, G7 foreign ministers meeting was held in Karuizawa, Nagano Prefecture last week. The G7 foreign ministers communique, the outcome of the 3 days of frank and in-depth discussion among the G7 foreign ministers, expressed for the first time in writing G7's commitment to a free and open international order based on the rule of law, and strong opposition to any unilateral attempt to change the peacefully established status of the territory by force or coercion anywhere in the world. The G7 foreign minister also had detailed discussions on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, reaffirmed our continued commitment to a world free of nuclear weapons, and confirmed that G7 will continue to work closely together in preparation for the Hiroshima summit. Regarding cooperation with emerging and developing countries, Foreign Minister Hayashi emphasized that the G7 should strengthen its engagement with the international partners through the active contribution by the G7 to various global issues, and that in doing so, G7 should not impose its values, but promote a free and open international order based on the rule of law, while taking into account the specific circumstances of each international partner. The G7 agreed to work closely together to address the challenges facing the world, such as energy and food security. Finally, I would like to express our expectation for the T7. The theme of this year's T7 is accelerating crisis response and the sustainable development. It is closely linked to the G7 discussion I have mentioned. Thus, I expect that the T7 will contribute to adding depth and breadth to the G7 discussions. As I mentioned at the outset, the international community is currently at a turning point in history. We must correctly assess the challenges we face from a historical perspective and formulate mid-long-term strategies to ensure that peace and prosperity are inherited to the next era. I look forward to the T7's recommendations that will reshape global governance for a new era. At the same time, today, we are faced with the unprecedented challenge, risk of the proliferation of false information, and cyber attacks due to the rapid expansion of the information space. The possibility of military application of emerging technologies, such as AI and quantum technologies, global environmental issues that are becoming more serious every day. The accumulation and development of specialized knowledge is essential as a prerequisite for the discussing solution to these new challenges among nations. I believe that T7 task force discussion will facilitate these efforts. Another expectation I have for the T7 is its role in aggregating the broad range of knowledge from the international community and disseminating it to help resolve issues that cannot be done by the G7 alone. As I mentioned, one of the key perspectives of this year's G7 is to strengthen our engagement with the global South countries. As this T7 summit is participated by experts from the G20 countries and beyond, I have high expectations that the T7 summit will provide a wide range of inputs and that the outcome will be shared with an even wider range of people. In this era of unprecedented change, the importance of think cannot be overemphasized. I am confident that free and open discussions at this T7 summit will produce important contributions. I would like to conclude my remarks by expressing my hope that the meeting over the next 2 days will provide a meaningful guidance for the resolution of issues in the new era. Thank you very much for the kind attention.
Let us thank State Minister Yamada for his great contribution.